welcome. We're here. This is the Grief Unchained live Facebook talk show. And I'm really excited today because I have a very special guest. Sharon Brubaker is with me. And you know, if you're tuning in, this show is really about overcoming. We're talking about things that are challenging, that are difficult, things that are traumatic, things that are painful. And not only are we talking about those stories, but also the overcoming part. How do I live again after something that is so challenging? Now, my name is Sandy Atmore. I'm a life coach and I'm an advanced certified grief recovery specialist. And I've been in the field of loss and grief for many, many years. And so I really wanted to bring these topics and bring them to people so that they could understand that life is possible. I myself have been through a lot of traumatic things when I was growing up, and I live a life of purpose and joy, and I really want to spread that to other people. So join me in welcoming Sharon Brubaker. Welcome, Sharon.
Hi, welcome. Yes, thank you.
So Sharon is an advanced grief recovery specialist. She is an author. She's a speaker. She's been doing grief recovery for over 12 years.
Yes.
And so Sharon, why don't you tell us a little bit about you, your family, where you are today?
So I live here in the LA area, and I've been married to my best friend and beautiful husband for about 34 years. And we have 3 children and 2 grandchildren. And I started teaching grief recovery 12 years ago after the tragic death of my nephew, Austin.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so it's very rewarding. We teach in that area, and it's been great.
That's awesome. Well, I'm really thankful that you're here today because, you know, I wanted to have you share a little bit about what led you to grief recovery, the death and what happened.
Right.
I wanted you to talk a little bit about that, and then let's talk about what the journey has been like for you in, you know, gaining your life back and what that's all looked like. So why don't you share a little bit about what happened and, you know, what brought you here?
Sure. So I was thinking about this today because this keeps going through my head. It's a day, you know, you never forget those days. You never forget. It's like almost there's a countdown to every moment before and after, right?
Yeah.
So I, at the time, was selling real estate, and I was sitting in a broker's open house. And my telephone rang, and it was my youngest daughter, Brittany. And she screamed into the phone that she lost Austin. She says, I lost Austin. And the thought that went through my head was, don't let her know you're scared. Like, be strong, right? That was the first thought that went through my head. But then she started to cry, and she says, Mom, I'm so scared. And when she said that, my knees buckled, and I just fell to the floor. But the whole time thinking, okay, keep your voice strong, keep your voice strong. And I tried to coax her through what to do. I said, he's walked off with somebody. Someone has a big truck. They have a motorcycle. He's left. It was about 3 hours after that initial phone call that we got the call that he had, in fact, drowned while at the lake with my family for Father's Day weekend. And he was 10 years old, and he died from carbon monoxide poisoning playing in the boats area. They have a big problem with carbon monoxide there at that lake. And my initial thought was, I have to help my sister through this. So this is really strange, and I talk about this often, but I had never used the word grief or grief group or grief support. I never, who thinks of, you know, of a 10-year-old dying? You know, that's other people, that happens to other people, right?
Yeah.
And so I if someone would have said to me, what is a grief support group? I would have said, they're groups that happen at the hospital. They're for seniors when their spouses die. I never thought I need a grief support group. I will need that. And so that from that moment after I went to her house and knocked on her door and gave her the bad news, I very quickly became in charge and trying to guide her and lead her through this. It felt to me as if someone had taken a knife and just stabbed me right in the heart. And I was walking around with that knife, Sandy, but I was so busy being strong for her because I thought only she was going to grieve and her husband was going to grieve, that I thought my job was to be strong. And so much so that I wouldn't even cry in front of my own children. And I forced them. My daughters were 19 and 17 at the time, and I kept telling them, you need to be strong. They need us right now. And I wouldn't even cry in front of them. It's so naive now when I think about it. The things that I did that were innate within me of how to handle this. It was really crazy.
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for sharing that, because
Thank you.
that's such a, like you said, a loss that you just never expect to be
Yeah.
dealing with. But it makes a lot of sense what you're saying, that we are taught from the time we're really young that we need to be strong.
Yes.
And that's part of how we deal with things when bad things happen, is that
Right.
we need to be strong. We need to carry it inside, and that by being strong, I'm helping somebody else. Like,
Yes.
in your mind, you felt like, I'm helping my sister by being strong. I'm
Exactly.
helping my children by being strong and teaching them to do the same thing,
Exactly.
because that is what you've learned.
And that's what I had learned. So Erica and I, Austin's mom, are 10 years apart.
Okay.
So that kind of formed a natural sort of mother-daughter relationship, and she looked up to me a lot when she was having her children. My kids were much older, and so we kind of had that relationship kind of going anyway. So it fell right into that. That was one thing. The second thing, now that I look back on it, is that my parents, they were the leaders whenever something happened. Whenever there was a tragedy, my parents were the first ones to show up. They would bring the food over. They would set up the funeral arrangements. They helped. I never saw my parents cry when there was a tragedy. They were there to help and do what needed to be done. At Austin's funeral, my dad came up to me and said, I don't like the way that the table was set up, something he was telling me. And I just looked at him, and he and I had this moment. I said, well, I'm in charge now. You're not in charge. But it was really what I had learned, seen him do all of those years. I just did what I'd seen them do. And so I negated my own grief for months. And not only that, no one ever asked me about me.
Wow.
People came up to me all the time and they were like, how's Erica doing? Oh my gosh, how's Lewis doing? How are the kids? No one ever said to me or asked me personally, Sharon, how are you doing? How are you handling this? And because no one ever asked me, I just kept pushing it down.
And I want to ask you a couple of things, actually,
Yeah.
but in pushing it down, where did that get you? In other words, was that helpful that you pushed it down? Because I think there are some people that would listen to this and go, well, yeah, that's what you do.
Yeah.
That's what you're supposed to do. What
Yeah.
else would you do? Why would you show your feelings? Why would you respond to that? What happened to you, do you feel like, in pushing it down? Where did that get you?
It came out in anger. I was very upset. I was on edge all the time. And somebody would say something and I would go off on the handle very quickly. I would go into the shower every morning and I would cry. I would cry because I didn't want my kids to see this, because I didn't want to upset them. And so as soon as I turned that shower off, I knew I have to be strong. And it's so funny now that I think about this, that I was absolutely using those words. Be strong. You have to be strong. You have to show them. And I really forced my children, who were grieving, to do the same thing I was doing. Like whenever they would have a moment and get emotional, I would make them stop it. You stop that right now. We need to be strong for them. They need us right now. So,
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
So what happened was that it became, I became very angry. I became yelling, screaming, and one of the ways that I found to soften the blow was to drink alcohol. And so I started drinking alcohol. I would drink some wine at night to help me get the edge off. And after we tried a few grief support groups and they didn't work out, I just thought, there's nothing out here. We just have to wait and we'll feel better in time.
Wow.
And so I gave up and kind of just stopped talking about it. And every day I would call her, Erica, and I would check on her. And every day, Sandy, we would go through the whole story for months.
Wow.
Then she would start with, and then you came to my house, and she wanted to talk about it constantly because that was all she had, was me listening. And so we were reliving this thing over and over again of Austin dying and what it was like. It was a miserable time. It was really a miserable time.
You know, I want to ask you too, what was it? So I understand that, people weren't really asking about how you were doing.
Right.
What were people saying to you? Were they saying helpful things? Were they saying things that weren't helpful? I mean, in general, obviously.
They were reinforcing the be strong. So people were telling me, you have to be strong for her. You have to help her. Thank God she has you. Thank God Erica has you, because she won't be able to get through this without you. And so now I also had my parents that were a little bit older, and I was worried about them as well. So I had that kind of role in the family anyway, but I kind of became this caretaker of everyone. And so that's really what I went after, was just making sure everyone was okay. The things that people were telling me was, you have to be strong for her, take care of her, she needs you right now. Thank God she has you to lean on, that sort of things, which were a lot different than what she was hearing. She kept hearing, I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine. But she was hearing it in a different way. And what she was hearing was, I'm so glad it's you and not me.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And she came up to me at one point. She says, if one more person says that to me, I'm going to punch them in the stomach and say, you see what this feels like? That's what it feels like 24/7 for me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what a really hard thing for you all to go through as a family. But
Right.
I think what I hear, and I think what I would want people to hear that are listening, is that not only had you learned to be strong growing up,
Right.
but that you were getting that reinforced by the
Yes.
people around you.
Yeah.
And being strong didn't give you the opportunity to grieve. It didn't give you the opportunity to share your heart. It didn't give you the opportunity to let out the pain that was inside, but it only reinforced that you needed to stuff it down and be strong, because that's what we do.
Yes. And the other thing was, Sandy, you know what? I didn't know how to grieve. I didn't
Really
know
great
how to
point.
grieve. Think
Great
about
point.
that.
Yes.
Who tells you that? And I'm really great at research, right? So I was like, okay, well, we have to plan a funeral. So right away, you go into planning this funeral. So I went to a couple funeral homes and I got some bids, and literally I called my brother-in-law. I said, okay, this is what I found out so far. And so it kind of started that I was one step ahead of them on everything. The police report, the death certificate, picking out the casket.
Yeah.
I would narrow it down for them so they didn't have to go through so much, right? That was keeping busy. Keeping busy goes together with being strong, because as long as you're keeping busy, and I was doing all that, I didn't have to grieve. But in actuality, I didn't even know how to grieve. I wouldn't have even known how to do it.
You know, I think that makes a really great point, because one of the things that you had talked about was, I would go in the shower and I would cry in the shower. But when the shower came off, I knew I had to put the face back on. You know, a lot of times when I talk to people, they feel like that's grieving.
Yeah.
If I'm going by myself
Yeah.
and I'm crying,
Yeah.
that's grieving,
Yeah.
right? But I have to help them to understand that that's not grieving.
Yes.
You have to grieve with people.
Yeah.
If I'm by myself and I'm crying, there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with crying, but it's just crying alone.
Yes.
It's not grieving. So I would imagine, even though you had those times in the shower, it didn't give you that relief in your heart, that resolve.
No, it just gave you a momentary relief, right? So someone said to me the other day, it's almost like if I gave you a beach ball and told you to hold it underwater. And you're pushing that beach ball underwater. That was what the pressure was. I was just
Yeah.
walking around holding this beach ball down the whole time, but there was no release from that, you know? There's no release from that. That was my job. I just kept pushing that pressure down. And that was one of the reasons that I really got into grief recovery, is because I didn't know. And I think most people don't know. And there was not, I mean, I could read some books, but it didn't feel right. It didn't fit right. One of the things that Eric and I talk about quite often is that I had learned in a medical assisting school, and she has a degree in psychology. We had both learned the 5 stages of grief and loss, right?
Yes.
So every day, Sandy, I would call her up and I would ask her, so where are you at today? And she would pick this random list, and she'd say, well, today I'm in denial. And we would talk, and I would say, denial? Well, you know we had a funeral, right? And she's like, yeah, but we could never make it fit. Like, we didn't
Wow.
understand it. And so we would talk it through. And when we got to grief recovery and we found out that there aren't any stages, it was like we both hugged and kissed each other, because we couldn't figure out why we couldn't make these things fit.
Wow. You know, I so appreciate that you brought that up. I really do, because you're absolutely right. I think a lot of times people will even say, am I in the right stage to be healing? I'm not sure if I've completed this stage yet.
Right.
And, just for anybody listening that isn't aware of the stages of grieving were research done by a woman named Kubler-Ross. And she did research on people that were terminally ill, and she found that they went through these stages. Yeah. And so what happened is they took her research and they applied it to anyone who was grieving anything. But the problem is, first of all, we're all different, number one.
Right.
We all respond. I mean, this is a very different loss than, say, somebody who's lost a parent, right? It's a different relationship.
Right.
And not only that, we're all different people.
Yes.
So we respond differently. And just so everybody knows, Kubler-Ross later on in her life actually issued a statement saying that she regretted the stages of grieving. She regretted that research because it was so misapplied. So I just want people to hear that, because the stages, the problem with that is that it can leave us in a place where I feel like if I complete those stages and I get to that last stage of acceptance, I've grieved. I should be healed now.
Okay, but here was the thing that we could not figure out.
Yeah.
How long do you stay in the stages? In each stage, anger and denial. And do you enter them simultaneously? Do you jump around?
Yeah.
It was like we couldn't figure this out, but we kept trying to attach the stages because people were bringing us books. Wow. They were absolutely bringing us grieving books, and most of them were on the stages. Someone actually brought us brought Erica the Grief Recovery Handbook.
Wow.
And Erica just kind of threw it on the side and didn't really look at it. There were quite a few books that came, and then I would read them, and then she and I went through it was always the stages. It was what I learned.
Wow.
And that you'll never get over the loss of a child, and just the advice that I was giving her based on what I was reading.
What you were reading.
Yeah.
What the information.
Yes.
So let's talk about this. So you are being strong. You're really helping your sister walk through this process,
Yes.
thinking, I need to be there for her.
Yes.
You're feeling angry. You've turned to alcohol because that's at least helping to keep the beach ball underwater. I love that analogy. When did that turn around for you? What started to happen where you found a solution that actually worked?
So I started sending Erica to grief support groups. I started doing some research, keeping busy again, right? And about the third group, she called me crying, and she said, please don't help me anymore. This is really what she said.
Oh.
She says, there's a guy in this group, and he's been in the group for 33 years. She says, Sharon, and she was in tears. She goes, I don't know what grieving looks like, but I have to tell you, I cannot be doing this 33 years from now.
Wow.
She's like, I have 2 other boys, and I need to be present for them. And so I kind of just left her alone, and we would just talk on the phone, and I would check in on her every day, and we didn't look for any more help. And about 8 months after he died, we stumbled upon the grief recovery method.
Wow.
And so because she had told me not to help her, I signed her up without her permission, and I paid for it, and I signed myself up, and my daughter Brittany, who was there when Austin died. But when I signed her up, I thought I was going to be with her. I'm going to take her to this because she doesn't want me to help her, so I'm going to take her to this. And so we went to our grief recovery class, and there were about 20 people in the class, and we sat down, and the instructor asked each and every one of us what we were doing there. And do you know that's the first time anyone ever asked me about me?
Wow.
And I literally fell apart right there in the chair. I started to bawl and cry, and that was the first time I realized I was grieving the loss of Austin. And I know that sounds so naive, but I didn't know how to do it. Mm-hmm. No one ever showed me how to do it. So we went through our grief recovery program, and at that time the classes were like 12 weeks, I think, at that time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it was a beautiful experience. But I also have to say this one other thing I think is so important. I felt as if there was a knife in my heart when he had died. And I felt that going through the grief, if I recovered, that I wouldn't have the pain anymore, and I wouldn't be able to sense him. And that was a little bit of a fear for me.
Sure.
But she walked me through, and I completed the program. The day after the program was finished, I called Erica up on the phone. And she was washing dishes, and we were just talking, and I lowered my voice because I wanted to say, I feel better, but I didn't want to say, hey, I feel better and your son died. I don't know if it worked for you, but I think it really worked. So I said, hey, I think that thing worked. She goes, that grief class? She said, heck yeah, it worked. And she yelled it. And when she yelled it, the very first thought in my head was, I have to help people everywhere. Because I had such a relief. I had so much more of Austin, and we were able to talk about him and share about him. And I think the thing that really shocked me looking back on it is that when people would see Erica, they were so impressed by the fact that, she would talk so openly about Austin and share her love for him and her experience. And grief recovery really brought her that. It really brought her that.
I really appreciate what you just shared, because when somebody has lost somebody that's close to them, when there's been a death, it's so true that the last emotion that we often feel is pain.
Yes.
And pain becomes that connection to the
Yes.
person. And we feel like, if I somehow release this pain, I'm saying goodbye to them forever, and I don't want to lose that connection.
Yes.
What I really appreciate about what you shared is that the truth is, when you find that something that helps you to release that pain, you actually have a better relationship with the
Yes.
person that you've lost.
Yes.
You are connected now to the beauty of the time you got to have with them. You are able to articulate it and talk about it. Like you said, instead of being in a place where, if somebody talks about this, I'm going to fall apart.
Right.
So I can't talk about it. So I just
Right.
got to keep holding the beach ball down.
Holding that beach ball down. And so one of the things that did happen right away, and I attribute this to my brother-in-law, Lewis, he wanted us to talk about Austin from day one. And I meet so many families where, don't speak ill will of the dead, and so they don't talk about the person who's passed away. I love that Lewis, he set the tone. And that's the other thing. We did what we saw Lewis and Erica do, and they talked about Austin, and they wanted us talking about Austin. And so that did help my family, even though it was still very painful.
Sure.
So then, after grief recovery was completed, it was just this new love fills in your heart. I mean, you literally walk a journey with that person.
Yeah.
You walk a precious journey with him. And even though my little journey with Austin was only for 10 short years, it still was so magical, right? It was so beautiful. And I was able to complete that relationship and have the pain removed. And now he's my reason why. He's totally my reason why.
Yeah.
And why I'm out there sharing this with people and sharing this message.
And why you can talk about him.
Yes, and why I can talk about him freely and openly and have that very relaxed state. I was there moments after he was born. Wow. I helped her with breastfeeding. I had to go to school quite often because he would be in trouble quite often. I share these stories, but I share about him quite often in grief recovery, and he's still alive for me. He's alive in my heart, and that's what's so important.
So would you say, sorry, I have a little cough here. Would you say that the difference then from losing him, and the way that it felt in your heart to how it felt after grief recovery, what is that difference like for you?
It's not painful. Talking about him is not painful. Being able to share about him is not painful. It's more joyful. It is something that I can share with other people as well. Does that make sense? I can share Austin with other people, and they can really see that and really see those moments in time. I think that's the biggest part.
Which is huge.
It's huge.
Yes, it's huge.
Absolutely huge. And we became that family. I asked Erica the other day, I said, how do you think we got picked? She says, I have no idea. I have no idea. But, he was a quirky little kid, and, so honored to be his aunt. Yeah, definitely. I can't imagine people that my heart breaks for them, that don't find this path.
Yes.
Right, Sandy?
Yes.
They don't find this path, and they suffer through on their own. Or you and I have talked to those people, or they don't think this is the way they should go, and they're leaving you, and you're like, I can help you.
Yes.
Or they just don't know. They think they need something else, or they need PTSD training, or they need,
So
it was trauma. I have to deal with the trauma. And I just know this is the answer.
Yes.
And we have to get the word out. We need to start teaching this in schools and teaching this to small children.
Yes.
It has to make a difference. People cannot just keep pushing through.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know what's so important about what you're saying is the problem wasn't just that you lost Austin.
Yes.
The problem was all of the information about how to deal
Yes.
with losing Austin.
Right.
All of the misinformation about that says that once you experience that, which is why your sister was having people say,
Yeah.
you know, kind of underline,
Yeah.
thank goodness
Yes,
it wasn't
exactly.
me. Because we all we hear is, once this happens, your life is over, and it will always be over. And we learn to stop living because something bad has happened.
Yes.
And that's not true.
That is not true. And that you never get over the loss of a child. And it's not that we got over.
Right.
We completed, she and I, and quite a few of my family members, we have completed our relationship with Austin. We completed our journey of all the things that were incomplete, and we have more of him. There's no getting over or we forgot him. Will forever be in our family, you know? We talk about where he would be right now. You know, he'd be 22 years old almost.
Wow.
Yeah, so just where would he be right now? What would he be doing? What would he have studied? You know, it's trying to figure that out. Like, we talk about that all the time. So, yeah, it's really kind of cool.
And it's beautiful. Like, when I hear you talk about it, I go, wow, that's really beautiful.
Yes.
And it doesn't sound like he's forgotten. It doesn't sound like we don't think about him anymore. We have to tiptoe around the subjects. It
Right.
sounds very embracing. Like,
Right.
yes, this happened, but we embrace him. He's
Yes.
still part of the family. But my life didn't have to be less than. Your life was less than when you were trying to stuff everything down.
Absolutely.
And be strong and deal with it
Absolutely.
that way.
Absolutely. And Jordan, her youngest, was 3 at the time. And do you know he's been raised with his brother Austin? And he was only 3 years old. But he's been raised that I have a brother Austin, and he talks about Austin.
Wow.
And even from his 3-year-old memories, you know, because we keep Austin alive in our hearts and in our family. We still celebrate his birthday every year. That's a big thing for us, to celebrate the birthday and not the death. And so we remember him, and it's just joyful. It's great. It's comfortable. It's very comfortable. And I don't know where I would be. It would still be, I've met people that 10 and 12 years, and they're still grieving the loss of their loved one.
Yeah. Because time in and of itself doesn't. It doesn't. No.
It doesn't. It absolutely doesn't. And it really changed for us. So just so honored to help people and walk through this with them. And so that's the main story that I share. Yeah,
I love
definitely.
it. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you, first of all, so much for being here today and for sharing this. I really wanted Sharon to be here because I think she really embodies what it means to go through something that's really painful and yet grieve it and walk in it and spread it to other people. She's an amazing specialist. If you don't know her, she's in Santa Clarita, and she has a great business there. And I'm going to be actually sharing her website also on the post. So if anybody wants to reach out to her, you can definitely do that through the post. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you. I just want to reach out to anyone who watches this that is not sure if this is right for them.
Yeah.
Please reach out to Sandy, have an amazing conversation with her, and see if this is the right program for you. I promise you, you will not go wrong. You know, we know there are people out there suffering right now
Yes.
that need this training,
Yes. Absolutely.
and we're here for you.
Yes, definitely. Well, I want to just thank everybody for tuning in and for listening today. And, you know, I want to, again, echo what Sharon said. If there's something that you've heard today that's touched your heart, you don't want to wait. Waiting doesn't make it better. We don't wait it out and then over time it's all of a sudden it dissipates. It doesn't happen like that. There is a better life waiting for you, so I really, really hope you reach out. Thank you so much for joining. And I want to give a shout out to the crew today, too, because they're awesome. These guys
Amazing
rock.
crew.
Yes, you guys are amazing. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.